Good afternoon. What a great introduction. I sound awesome. So today we're going to talk, I guess, a bit. I've got a very short period of time. I only got a half an hour to talk about what we do, I guess, and about the industry as a whole. The issue that we're facing in terms of sustainability and sustainable travel is how it's evolved over the course of the last 20 years. If you look back in the mid-90s, ecotourism was first mentioned. People started to change the way they lived at home. People started to recycle more at home. People started eating organic, 100-mile diets. All these kind of things started. And people wanted their holiday time to match their values in which they lived at home. There was a tipping point for some people, because shortly after the mid-90s, through the internet age and through the information age, and we all have phones now that have so much information in our pockets, people started realizing that their holiday choices didn't naturally match the way they lived at home. It wasn't sustainable. And so throughout the course of between 1995 and 2010, you saw things like ecotourism start. And then the idea of the Ecotourism Society actually released a definition of what ecotourism was, and they introduced it as responsible tourism, which clearly defines something totally different about what responsible travel was, whereas ecotourism was about the environment and our continuing concern for climate change. But then by the time responsible tourism came along, people were concerned about creating jobs, local economies benefiting from tourism, and the fact that the all-inclusive holiday was growing at a rapid rate, and people were local communities were no longer benefiting from people when they traveled into foreign countries. And with that, of course, spawned then sustainable travel. And sustainable travel was kind of a mix of the two. It was a mix of ecotourism and it was a mix of responsible tourism. And suddenly sustainable tourism kind of rode the wave of Al Gore and the inconvenient truth. So the issue that we face as an industry, as a tourism industry right now, is we've really confused the consumer. Because the consumer ultimately just wants to go on a holiday. They ultimately just want to relax. They want to do the right thing, but they want to also make it easy. And the problem I think that we face as an industry is, first of all, our industry isn't clearly defined, and the sellers of that travel, the retail space who sell different types of travel, aren't clearly defined themselves on what sustainability, what responsible, or what ecotourism truly means. And so if the seller themselves are confused, they're not able to educate the consumer, because ultimately the consumer has to create the demand for the industry to change, right? For years in our industry, tour operators were the pressure was on the tour operator to ask, what are you going to do for the environment? What are you going to do for local people? Marriott's, Hilton's, cruise companies. What are you doing to your ships with gray water? It's all the pressure was on the operator to make those changes. But ultimately, the consumer is what's going to drive change. I think that's the message we were trying to get across years ago when we started our Future of Tourism talks, to tell people that, for the first time we were asking the consumer the question, and in order to educate the consumer, it's the consumer that creates the demand, and entrepreneurs fill demand. Entrepreneurship is highly overglorified. Especially today, we have 27-year-old billionaires who are, creating stuff, and so entrepreneurs have become very sexy, and it's become something interesting, but it's very few entrepreneurs that create new programs or new ways in which you do things like Apple or Facebook or these kind of companies. 99% of entrepreneurs create products for demand. So if you create that demand, they fill that product. So if people choose more sustainable products, then that demand will be filled by tour operators. A good example would be in the hotel world, where Hilton was very quick to put to the world, and did many different programs prior to Marriott, that jumped on much later and decided to do different things in order to fill the demand of consumers, where they see two equal products, but if they feel good about one, they're going to book that ahead of the other. So looking back, just looking at the tourism industry, I'm going to see if I can change this, right. I've got to give you some statistics. 10 years ago, 1 in 5 people chose an all-inclusive holiday. And today, That is 75% and growing. So more and more people are choosing all-inclusive compounds, cruises, and these created environments. And I've done a few interviews today, and people are all asking me about these statements that I make. One of them being that it seems like tour operators spend all their time trying to create Western environments so people feel like they've never left home. And we're kind of company that says if you don't want to feel like you're at home, you should just stay at home. Is what our message is. Like, if you should really feel like you're traveling to another country, and it seems like in today's world we're trying to create these Western bubbles so people feel like they've never left their comfort zone when they travel. And these all-inclusive holidays are growing in number. And probably one of the most horrifying statistics from the UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, out of every $100 spent on a vacation or tour in a developing country, actually only $5 actually remains in the economy. So that's a horrifying statistic that came out of UNEP, that local people aren't benefiting as more and more people crowd into compounds and resorts. And so this is what's not sustainable in our industry, right? Local people aren't benefiting. As we see the rise of tourism, tourism or holidays and traveling is getting easier and cheaper than ever before. One of the amazing, in 2012, we had 1 billion tourists for the first time, which is amazing. Like, they've been talking about hitting that $1 billion mark for a very long time, and we hit it about 2 years earlier than they anticipated, because it's getting easier and cheaper than ever before for people to travel. We all see it. Every country has numerous discount airlines now. I mean, I think it's amazing in Europe where you can travel for £5. I don't know how but then they charge you $600 for tax, but I don't know how that works. That's a European thing. You guys have that down with those discount airlines. Travel for free, but pay $800 tax. But there's been 1 billion. It's getting easier and cheaper than ever before for people to travel, right? And there's 1 billion people traveling. There was 566 million people traveled in the first 6 months in 2014. So travel continues to grow at a rapid pace. And the issue that we have is that it's not going to scale and look exactly like it does today. It's not going to mean that we'll double in size. They say we're going to hit 1.8 billion by the year 2020, right? So as a business case, people think tourism is a great industry to be in right now. There's not many industries in the world that can say that they are going to double in size in the next decade. Tourism can say that that's the plan, but the problem that we face on the sustainability side is it's not going to scale. It's not going to look exactly like it is today. There's going to be areas that are going to multiply times 5, times 10, like China is going to explode. Some of them are most iconic destinations, like the pyramids of Egypt, the Great Wall of China, Machu Picchu. These areas are going to explode in tourism. They're not going to just double. And someone has to be looking at the sustainability and how we're going to preserve some of the world's most beautiful and natural heritage sites. And in 10 years, according to the WTTC, the global GDP of tourism will be $10 trillion, or 10% of the global, the global GDP, which is an astounding number. So, the future of tourism that we talk about with my presentation anyways is about how can we make tourism be that force of good that can actually, change the world. And what would have to happen for companies to actually have that positive impact? And could tourism be the greatest form of wealth distribution that the world has ever seen? Because in contrast to all of that, out of the 40 poorest countries in the world, tourism is the second largest form of revenue next to oil. So people are traveling to some of the world's most in need and poorest countries in the world. So what would it take if more money was spent locally and more money was kept in that economy? What would it take for business models to have to change for tourism to be seen as one of the greatest forms of wealth distribution that the planet has ever seen? Right? With $10 trillion going on tours every day, what would have to happen? And so that, that's the kind of question we ask all the time at G-Adventures about how we can be a vehicle for that form of wealth distribution, right? Because we are traveling and people are wanting to go and see some of the poorest countries in the world. We can have that positive impact. In order for that to happen, people have to think differently. We have to think differently, and we have to go back to beyond our product. The issue that we have in the travel industry is we spend so much time on defining the most amazing product. And you have to have the most amazing product, but in order to create change, you have to transcend your product. You have to go beyond what you offer and understand the change of how the consumer is going to consume and how the consumer is going to relate to brands in the future. So let me try and explain that. The idea of social entrepreneurship, the idea of social innovation has been around for decades. And social innovation and social entrepreneurship has been for nonprofit companies. So I'll give you an example. When World Wildlife Fund sells you a tiger, a stuffed tiger, for $10, they're acting like a regular company. They're selling you a product, but they're using that money to save the tiger. Right? That was traditionally social innovation, when a nonprofit acts like a for-profit company to solve a social problem. Right? That traditionally has been going on for a very long time. Lots of nonprofits around the world act like for-profit companies, selling products, selling services, different things where you can, even the Adopt a Child program, all these different things. They're selling services, but they're using that money to solve social problems. Well, social media has come along now and really changed the way people think and created a transparency that never existed before between brands and the consumer. An example of that I always use is Nike. So Nike had a long run for decades having a one-way conversation with consumers, telling you that Nike was the best athletic clothing company in the world. It was a one-way conversation where they hired Michael Jordan to slam dunk the ball. You saw all those great commercials, and you went to a store, you saw a Nike jacket, you thought of Michael Jordan because they've communicated to you by commercial that Michael Jordan is awesome and he's great, and then you think, oh, I want to be like Michael Jordan, and then you buy that jacket. That has been the one-way conversation. So what's happened now is iconic brands have to have a two-way conversation with consumers, and it's created transparency. If you want to follow Nike today, you just don't watch commercials. You can follow Phil Knight on Twitter. You can follow all of their employees on Twitter. All of their factories have Facebook pages and have communication. If they treat any of their employees wrong, they have access to blogs and they can write anything. And so now that two-way conversation is a very different way in which you become an iconic brand. Iconic brands have been built through advertising campaigns, through a one-way conversation for the last 50 years. And we all believe it. The greatest example of this is Enron and Andersen Consulting. So Andersen Consulting had a problem in that they were the accounting firm on record for Enron. So when Enron had the fraud charges, they thought, we've got a problem. We are the accounting firm for Enron. What are we going to do? So what did they do? Overnight, they got the consulting division, their most profitable division, and they hired the athlete of the moment, who was Tiger Woods. So think of Tiger Woods back then. He's not so great now, but back then he was the best athlete. And they took a billboard in every airport in the world. Do you remember the Tiger Woods billboards in every airport? And it said at the bottom, Accenture. Had Tiger Woods chipping from the green, and it said Accenture. Overnight, Andersen Consulting became Accenture. They changed their name, same people, same services, same company, but they hired Tiger Woods, and you then went to the airport, you saw Tiger Woods and said, wow, Accenture, it's a great company. They have Tiger Woods, they must be great. And overnight, we believed Accenture was the best brand ever, and they became the largest consulting company in the world overnight, from Andersen to Accenture, with just that one-way conversation. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't exist anymore, and that transparency in business is what's changing the way consumers change. The younger generation, the next generation, who actually, my daughter, who's 13 years old, told me yesterday, Facebook is for old people. I was like, what? Please. I'm trying to, and there's a new kind of business that combines that, and it's called social enterprise. And social enterprise is really what's changing the line between social entrepreneurship, social media, and creating a new style of business, which is called social enterprise. Businesses and brands that make people's lives better, creating purpose around your product, and no longer just promoting the best possible product. You're creating a purpose for why people sell you, why people buy you, and creating a two-way conversation through transparency, through social media, which is engaging people to brands at an unprecedented level, but it's very different to the one-way conversation that Nike had in the 90s, or if McDonald's released a new McSomething sandwich, they would just hire Matt Damon in a movie placement and then hire someone, and you would believe overnight that it was the best sandwich in the world. That just doesn't work anymore for these for the next generation who's going to be consuming. So for the first time ever, large brands, in order to be an iconic brand, large companies have to act like small entrepreneurs. They're constantly, and they hate it. You know, we all have the same free tools. So with that creates opportunity for companies because we all have the same tools. We all have access to the same free tools to engage customers as McDonald's, as, you know, Harley Davidson, as Starbucks. All of these companies are engaging with the same free tools that we have access to. This is a good and a bad thing. It's, you know, it causes a lot of noise. You guys have probably seen all kinds of noise when you switch on your phone with advertising and email promotions that are constantly coming at you. But at the same time, for small entrepreneurs or small scale entrepreneurs, like how we started, or probably a lot of people in this room, the opportunities are great because we're all on this, it's a level playing field for the first time. You know, creativity comes from all over, you know, viral sensations happen in many different ways. No one can predict what will be the next big thing because we're all operating from the same tools to catch those eyeballs. And it's, and note that those, you know, those $100 million Accenture ad campaigns or the Michael Jordan $100 million campaigns to you know, sell a new set of running shoes no longer works, no longer has the same impact. And it does not create an iconic brand, which traditionally could have been bought. You know, if Procter & Gamble wanted to release a new shampoo, they would create the concept, create the design, and let's say they were saying, okay, it's gonna be a sustainable shampoo, and we're gonna call it Green Poo. And we're gonna just, we are going to get Matt Damon to use it in his next movie. Everyone's going to see it. And we're going to get Cameron Diaz to do the commercial. And overnight, Green Poo is the best shampoo everyone has ever seen, and we're all just using it, right? But now, companies like Dove. Do you remember Dove? And I don't know if Europe had the same campaign. Dove created a two-way conversation. So as an immigrant to Canada, Dove was the cheapest possible soap ever created to man when we were born, my parents went shopping. They would pay $4.99 and get 25 bars of Dove this long. And they'd bring it home, and they couldn't even fit it in the car. They'd tie it to the roof as they brought home the Dove. Dove started an ad campaign that was black and white, and they had, you know, the naked middle-aged women, curvy women that were kind of crouched down, and they had a voting campaign. Is it naked, or is it wrinkled, or is it beautiful, was the question. And you're kind of like, both, but anyways. And suddenly, overnight, Dove, with the same products, the same shampoo, the same soap, the same everything, overnight became a premium brand. And if you look at Dove soap, the same company, if you look at it in any store now, it's in line with the premium brands, all over a two-way conversation through viral communication. Giving you an example of how iconic brands these days are made. But leadership is about creating a movement. And people don't understand the old tradition of what leadership truly means. Leadership is today about creating a movement. And I give those examples all the time. And I always show a video showing, you know, because people say, well, what does that mean? The old tradition of leadership, of leading your employees into battle, and, you know, the Henry V or the Braveheart kind of leadership doesn't exist anymore. And leadership to the consumer is about getting people involved in your story and creating a social dialogue and your culture becoming part of your brand. Because people buy things from people. People buy things from other people in the future, not companies. Here's an example of what a movement looks like in 2 minutes. Take a look.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So that gives you an idea of leadership. And when you say what culture is your brand, and when you see the idea of social enterprise, how people, but brands that will matter in the future are brands that will make people's lives better. And the idea that people don't buy products from companies, they buy products from other people. That's when you engage your employees and engage your customers to relate to your brand to a much higher purpose beyond your product. With us, with our company and the people that drive our business and the success of our business, it's all about our people. And people relate to our business because of our values and what we stand for as a company, but they engage with us because our people are the best extensions of our brand. So how we hire and fire and how we recruit people, how we retain and recruit the best, is all based around our company culture and how our company ends up being a big part of our brand. And many people, have a hard time understanding this. I'll just mention quickly about my book. So I wrote Loop Tale, it was 2 years ago now, but it was out all last year. I guess Loop Tale was about my ideas on social entrepreneurship and the idea of how social enterprise can change the world and how travel specifically can be a force for good and change people's lives. I didn't expect it to do as well as it did. As you know, it went number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list, and actually just kind of ruined my life last year, to be totally frank. I did about 14 book tours around the world, and if I was an author, that would have been a nice thing, but I have a company to run. But, the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, wrote the foreword for my book. It was the first time that he'd ever written a foreword, or it's the first time he had ever endorsed a business book. And it was about, his views on business are similar to mine in how businesses can create happiness. When you're talking about a business model that engages people and you want your brand to engage your customers, it's all about the pillars of happiness. Everything we do at G Adventures is about the 4 pillars of happiness. When I talk at business conferences, this is when people start saying, what does happiness have to do with business? Especially if you go to England, in Britain, as soon as you start talking about happiness with the Brits, they all get squirmish. There's a science to happiness. There's 4 main pillars to happiness, right? And I didn't make this up. There's been hundreds of studies to what drives human happiness. And if you ask people around the world, what makes you happy? They'll say, getting a new shirt, getting a new pair of shoes, walking my dog, getting a new car. And these are what we call momentary happiness. People that are happy for a moment when you get a new shirt or get a new pair of shoes or walk your dog. But when you look at the science of sustained happiness, there's 4 main pillars. And His Holiness, I'm not a Buddhist, but His Holiness believes that our only purpose in life is to achieve happiness. So think of that for 1 second. He believes that our only purpose in life is to achieve happiness. There's nothing else. And when you realize that your happiness is directly related to creating happiness for others, that's really what makes the world a special place. And more, but the thing is, we need miserable people, or else our economy would collapse, because people are always consuming, trying to string along all these moments of happiness. So so we need miserable people, or our economy would collapse. So you have to keep buying stuff, or else the whole world would collapse. So happiness and the 4 pillars of happiness is what drives our our business and our success. And there's the four main things, I'll go over them quickly, is the ability to grow. So within any organization, your ability to grow, if you work hard, you get a promotion, you can grow and you can develop. If you can't grow, you can't achieve happiness. The next pillar of happiness is being connected. How many people here who have worked for companies where they couldn't stand the people they worked with or worked for? Hands up. Okay, some of you are honest, the rest of you are liars, all of you. Being connected is one of the four pillars of happiness. And I'm a believer that the reason Facebook, which is for old people apparently, but Facebook is so popular because people are trying to be more connected. People are constantly reaching out to be more connected. Why else would you want to connect with people? Does anyone, you get a connection. I sat behind you in math class in grade 4. Let's connect on Facebook. And all of these kind of messages that people get. People are reaching for connectedness, and it's a direct pillar of achieving happiness. And what we call sustained happiness, not momentary happiness. Being part of something greater than yourselves. Every company has to be able to create something and have every employee feel that they're part of something much greater than themselves. And having that purpose-driven business model. That in itself is what engages customers to a much higher purpose and engages you beyond whatever product it is you sell. And the last one revolves around freedom. The freedom to think differently, the freedom to make mistakes, the freedom to be whoever you want to be, and to be successful as a collective group of people. Those are for us, how business models have to change, and it's relevant to tourism, but it's relevant to any space on how businesses are successful in the social revolution. In a social space when you're trying to engage customers. Because the other thing that we have to think of as travel companies is we have to create a business model that transcends our individual cultures, because our customers can come from anywhere. So your customers can come from the Middle East, they can come from the United States, they can come from Scandinavia, but happiness is universal. Happiness drives everyone the same, globally drives everyone the same way. And if you truly believe that our only purpose in life is to achieve happiness, there's no difference in why people would work for your organization. And attracting the best people, retaining the best people, all circled around a business model of happiness. And that was kind of what Looptail was about in a nutshell. And I want to just give you a couple examples. And I know I'm running out of time. I think I started late, but how much time do I have? Can I go on like an extra? I think I started late. I've got a bit to go. You guys, if you have to go, just go. I'm pull up a chair. Let's have a slumber party. I'm going to just give you some live examples, because my worst fears when I talk to audiences is, and I came a long way, and remember how much you paid here. So just listen to me for 2 minutes. So my worst fear is public speaking, talking about these concepts of happiness, talking about these concepts of social enterprise without giving you live examples. So let me give you 2 live examples, and then I'll have you on your way. This is the Women's Weaving Co-op. So here's the issue this is in Peru, to the Sacred Valley. We're the largest carrier of people on the Inca Trail than any other company in the world. We consume 32% of the global market share of Inca Trail permits. Number 2 is like 7%, to give you an idea of our size compared to everyone else. We pass through an area that has 0 employment for women, right? 0 employment for women, and we realize that the younger generation is no longer weaving. So they're losing all of their traditional storytelling, all their patterns, all of their Incan traditions, which is in weaving, because the younger generation is moving into Cusco to serve our customers. As we become successful, all of these children are working in the retail stores, working in restaurants, working in bars, selling stuff on the streets, whatever it is, they're all coming down from the hills to work, to get jobs, as we've grown over the years. So as a responsible business owner, I can do 2 things. I can say, well, that's not my problem, or we can do something about it. So we created the Women's Weaving Co-op, and the Women's Weaving Co-op was going to take all of our passengers as they drove out to the Inca Trail to start, and you would stop, and we would bring women in the village, 60 to start, 90, and now it's branching out into 2 different communities. They were going to weave all day, teach the younger generation how to weave, and our customers would come and spend the day on the way, learn how to weave, have lunch, and have time learning about the Incan traditions and textiles. It was a fantastic project. And for a business, social enterprise, this is an example of social enterprise. We solved a social problem that we saw as an issue, and we also created differentiation. So there's 1,000 companies around the world that offer the Inca Trail, but none of them have the Women's Weaving program. The minute we opened the Women's Weaving Co-op, all of our competitors drove up with their customers. They said, "Can we visit the Women's Weaving Co-op?" We're like, "No, get the hell out. Get your own." And so we then, of course, raised the bar of our industry as well, because we had something that nobody else had, right? Let me give you a quick video of what that looks like.
We think travel is about going places, about departure points and destinations. But this isn't why we go. A stamp in your passport reminds you where you've been, but not why you went. We travel because we're looking for something. Something important. Something meaningful. Something that matters. Traveling takes a lot from us, but what we leave behind is worth so much more than what we take away. When we travel, we're not leaving our homes and our families behind. We're searching for new ones.
So that gives you an example of social enterprise, how we use to solve the social solution, creating differentiation, finding a business solution for that. I'm going to give you an idea of what we call making a movement. In Africa, an example of this, and I have a video, but I'm going to pass by it because we're running out of time, but I'll give you the example of how we created a movement here. I was literally flying to London. I read The Economist about in Kenya that had the famine that was there, where there was Somalians coming across to get to refugee camps. And I read that people were dying of dehydration on the way to, and I went to our foundation and said, can we install water tanks halfway so people at least don't die of dehydration? I read a horrific story in The Economist of, a woman with, her family was 9 people, including herself, 8 children, and she arrived with 4. And the rest had died of dehydration on the way. Horrific story. And we read these stories all the time, and you're kind of on a plane, and you just kind of think, oh, well, that's horrible. But I said, is there a way we can kind of put water tanks halfway down the middle? And they said, well, we could. And we talked to CARE, who had the water tanks. The UN would have to supply the water, but it would cost $25,000 for one tank. I said, so how could we do that? So we went on Twitter, and I sent one message, one tweet out, and then through our foundation, we set up a page, and we detailed the problem, and before 24 hours hit, we had raised $50,000, and within 3 or 4 days, we hit over $100,000 from our travelers. $5 and $10 at a time, no major donations. There was no $10,000 or $5,000 donations. It was all $10, $5, $25, $50, $100 donations at a time. All came in. It blew up our servers, actually, and we were able to install those water tanks to give people a chance. That has nothing to do with travel, had nothing to do with us running great safaris in Africa. It has everything to do with being a human story and us transcending our product and engaging our customers to a much higher purpose and creating a movement around the idea of travel and and our brand representing a force for good. I'm going to skip the video, and you can probably go to our website and see it another time, but and just give you quickly some examples, other quick examples of social enterprise. This is our latest one in India, where we have this new program called Women on Wheels. So in Delhi, where there's been a lot of news lately about the safety for women in India, we are giving cars to our new Women on Wheel program. And there's women from the slums that we're on an 18-month training program where they'll get a driver's license, and now they're doing all of our arrival transfers when you arrive in India. So they'll do all of our arrival transfers. So when you arrive in India, you'll be picked up by the Women's on Wheels program. When you take, also in Delhi, when you take your first trip with us, the first day, which is the city tour, you'll take a city tour with the Street Kids Home. So we used to do, like every other company uses a local operator to do a city tour for day one. We started working with the Street Kids Home, the Salam Balak Trust, who their needs are for the young kids that are in the trust to learn English, and they have opportunities to study overseas. And so we met their needs and put a training program in place. And now when you take a city tour with us in Delhi, you work with the Salam Balak Trust. To give you an idea of some of the programs that we offer. These are probably our biggest moment to prove our social enterprise desires came when we did a partnership with the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank out of Washington, and the MIF, the Multilateral Investment Fund, who did a multi-million-dollar project with us to build our first 5 new sustainable projects through Latin America, being, which is a restaurant in the Sacred Valley, which we were going to have 15,000 people, campsites, homestay programs through Central America, through some of the poorest regions in Latin America that had no employment, and we'd be able to run traffic through. It was highly controversial when they signed the deal. As a matter of fact, when I presented in Washington, the audience booed me, which was a fine how do you do, because they believed that the IDB was giving money to a for-profit business to make our business better. And I proved to them over 2 years that we were more than a business, that we were a social enterprise, and we redefined the way people should look at business. And they stuck their neck out. This project was supposed to be a 5-year program, and we completed it and wrapped it up in 18 months. It's been if you actually go on the IDB Facebook page, our restaurant in Sacred Valley is up there, and the actual words says it's the most successful tourism community project ever in the world. I didn't say it, but I believe it, but I didn't say it. So the IDB, it's up on the Facebook page right now. To give you an idea of us as a business, where we've evolved in the idea of social enterprise and defining the way people can see the world, but at the same time, create wealth distribution and be a force for good for travel. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for coming out today, and have a good time at ITB. Thank you.